We are also honored to welcome our speaker, Ms. Yeboah Boadi, who is a dedicated environmental professional and a small-scale mining officer at the Minerals Commission of Ghana, with expertise in biodiversity research, reclamation, and sustainable mining practices. Please join me in welcoming them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Efia Pokwa, for introducing our chairperson and speakers. So now our chairperson and speakers have been introduced. So we'd like to hear from our chairperson, remarks from our chairperson in the person of Professor Alexander Kofi Enin. Professor Alexander Kofi Enin, please, the floor is yours.
Hello and good evening, everyone. I hope I can be heard, right?
Yes, please, you can be heard.
All right. So good evening once again. And first, let me express my gratitude to the organizers of this important workshop for inviting me to chair this very first workshop from AusIMM. And I'd like to say that as a passionate lecturer and researcher in the area of biodiversity and conservation for the past 20 years, it really excites me to be a part of this and actually to see that our students are interested in biodiversity and conservation issues, and more importantly, to be a part of it as a chairman. I also want to say that the topic that has been chosen is one that is very timely if you consider all that is happening around us. The topic on safeguarding biodiversity in the mining sector, strategies for conservation and rehabilitation, and sustainable resource development. I can tell you that this is very, very timely, very, very important topic, as I said, given what is happening in this country. Now, it's interesting to know that in the past 20 years, I have been a very strong advocate through my lectures for the education and sensitization of our youth, and indeed all manner of people in the country about the need for biodiversity conservation. But I do this not just in Ghana. When I go, I get the opportunity to go outside and teach. I do the same thing. I teach biodiversity, and I'm very, very passionate about sensitizing our people about the need for biodiversity conservation. This passion of mine actually stems from my knowledge that as a civilized world, it is incumbent on us to safeguard biodiversity if we are to derive maximum benefit from these resources, as well as preserve them for future generations. I believe that biodiversity conservation is the surest way to achieve sustainable development. And this is self-evident. If you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and the Global Arches Target, which is Global Biodiversity Target, you see strong linkages between these two targets and goals, suggesting that the only way, in fact, one of the most important ways of achieving sustainable development as we all want to have is through biodiversity conservation. Now, this belief also aligns with the view of the Vice Chair of IPBS, International Panel of Ecosystem Service and Biodiversity, that is Professor Sandra Diaz, who said that biodiversity and the life support systems are the life safe net, the safe net for humanity. Unfortunately, this net has been stretched to the limit. The danger is that nobody knows when the tipping point or the breaking point will be reached. Members, it is important to note that biodiversity provide us with many services as humans. I mean, from provisional services, from cultural services, we have supporting services and regulatory services. Biodiversity help us a lot. And in fact, as I've been said, you know, I'm sure a lot of people know this, that the last tree dies, the last man will die. This shows the importance, demonstrates the importance of biodiversity to human civilization. So, as also know, Ghana has been endowed with rich biodiversity. We do have, if you look at various ecosystems that we have in the country, we do have a lot of biodiversity. Unfortunately, as you all are aware, in the last 2 decades, we've also seen dramatic increases in the or intensification in the anthropogenic factors or stresses that tend to affect biodiversity. And you know, one thing that is become so topical in the country is the issue of illegal small-scale mining. So for me, it is not a question of if we need to do something. It's a question of when. And for me, the time is now that as a country, we need to do something about the wanton destruction of various ecosystems in the country. And that is why I find this workshop so timely and important, that we are able to discuss, appreciate some of the strategies. We know the problem already. So it's good that we are so much on the problem, but I want to look at the strategies that can be used to conserve this degraded ecosystem. That is the water bodies, the land, the agricultural land. We have the forest. All of these things, even air has been affected. How do we address this biodiversity challenge in order to boost life in this country? And so I find this workshop very, very timely and interesting. And it is my hope that we all, as the moderator said, we all take active part in the discussion, so that by the end of it, we would have learned something, would have contributed something to ensure that we all have a safe and very healthy environment to live in, not just for ourselves, but for future generations. So on that note, I want to say that I accept the chairmanship of this important workshop and crave your indulgence to support so that we all learn something from this. Thank you so much, and God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Alexander Inin, for your remarks. And please, like Prof hinted on, please let's do what to actively listen to everything that is being said, because it's not just for us, it's for the future generation to come, to ensure sustainable development and to also advance our careers in this field. So, to the most important segment of today's workshop, the presentation on the topic, Safeguarding Biodiversity in the Mining Sector, Strategies for Conservation, Rehabilitation, and Sustainable Resource Development. This presentation is going to be done by Nana Akua Yeboah Boadi from Minerals Commission. Ms. Nana Akua Yeboah, please, the floor is yours. We are open to listen to you. Please do well to note your questions down, listen attentively, so that whatever questions you have, and it's time for the question and answer segment, you'll be able to voice out your questions and concerns. Thank you very much. Please, Ms. Nana Akua Yeboah, the floor is yours. We are all ears.
Good evening, everyone. Distinguished guests, industry personnel, chairman of the session, the AusIMM patron and AusIMM Tarkwa Student Chapter. My name is Nana Akua Yeboah Boadi, and I'm currently serving as an assistant officer with the Minerals Commission. I would also like to extend my special recognition to Mr. Henry Ntwi, founder of the AusIMM Tarkwa Student Chapter. Your leadership and continuous investment in capacity building across the mining industry is really appreciated.
I would also acknowledge all our invited dignitaries from regulatory institutions, the mining industry, academia, all professionals who have taken the time out to be here with us today. Thank you also to the organizers for creating this knowledge sharing platform, and to everyone who is joining us today, a big thank you to you. Kindly give me a minute. I am having some issues with projecting. Kindly let me know if you can see the presentation.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes, please. We can see the presentation.
All right. So with your permission, I would now begin with a session on safeguarding biodiversity in the mining sector, strategies for conservation, rehabilitation, and sustainable resource development. So by the end of the session, we would have had a fair knowledge on the importance of mining to Ghana's economy, biodiversity, and its roles that it plays, and would link biodiversity to mining, how mining activities affect biodiversity, and would also highlight on some key strategies for conservation, rehabilitation, and sustainable resource development. Would go on to also talk about some innovative ideas, would brush briefly on the legal framework, and then we'll address a case study at the end of the session. This case study would help us to understand how mining activities are building credible, evidence-based environmental performance. So moving on, before we dive even into biodiversity, it's important to appreciate the extent of the mining contribution to Ghana's economy. The sector consistently delivers a significant share of our GDP and more than 40% of the total export earnings, largely from gold, bauxite, and manganese. Mining is also a significant employer. It supports over 1 million livelihoods, creating opportunities that ripple through households and communities. And beyond revenue, mining also drives real development. Mining companies invest in roads, schools, healthcare facilities, and water systems. An example is the Yeboah Primary Schools project in the Sanso community. The value chain doesn't just stop at the mine. Mining also supports logistics, engineering, manufacturing, and in places like Tarkwa and Obuasi, mining activities have empowered dozens of local engineering and transport businesses. So mining, as we have gotten to know, is an essential part of Ghana's economy. Which makes sustainability not only environmentally responsible, but also economically strategic move. Talking about biodiversity is simply the variety of organisms in a particular given habitat. So it's basically the plants and animals surrounding us. And the biodiversity plays a significant role in our lives and in mining as well. So when we see the ecosystem services that mining, biodiversity gives to us, we can look at the top of the presentation. You see the diagram shows us the ecosystem services that biodiversity provides for us, and then how these ecosystem services support our daily livelihood. So mining happens to be in communities where a lot of people depend on fishing and on farming. So if mining is having a negative impact on their livelihoods, it starts to bring a lot of tension in our communities. And for this reason, we have to prioritize biodiversity management in our mining practices as well. And also prioritizing biodiversity also ensures that we adhere to our legal compliance, and it also gives us the social license to be able to practice mining without having any problems. So biodiversity also really underpins a lot of other sectors: agriculture, forestry, and tourism. So if we are safeguarding biodiversity, we are not just looking at the economic benefits of it, we are also reducing the dependency on our mineral exports as well. So the link between biodiversity and mining. So in Ghana, most of our gold belts sit right inside some of the country's richest ecological zones. And that means every mining decision directly affects biodiversity. When we clear vegetation or fragment habitats, we don't just lose trees, we trigger soil degradation, soil erosion, and heavy sediment loads in our rivers. Healthy biodiversity acts as an invisible infrastructure. It stabilizes our ecosystem, it regulates our water and soil, and also moderates local climate patterns. So with these systems functioning, mines face fewer risks, the slope stability is better, we reduce flooding, and then we lower our rehabilitation costs as well, and then we strengthen our social license to operate. However, over 70% of small-scale operations still work very close to our rivers, and they drive deforestation, siltation, and then collapse of our aquatic life. Water, soil, climate stability are operational assets. They determine whether a mine is resilient, and if it's resilient through its life of mine, or if it's vulnerable to escalating environmental and reputational risk. So unlike how we perceive it, biodiversity isn't just safeguarding biodiversity is not just a charity work that we are doing for other people. It's actually a core risk management, cost control, and long-term value creation for the sector as well. So we all acknowledge attest to the fact that there are so many mining companies that are putting in several measures to make sure that biodiversity is preserved. They are putting in so many measures to make sure that our environment is good, our environment is safe for us to live in. However, there are still challenges that we are facing day in, day out. There are challenges that the mining companies are still facing, including the irreversible habitat loss. So when mining is done in certain habitats, certain very sensitive habitats, it's very difficult for them to reclaim it back to exactly how it was. And certain endangered species that were in the habitat tend to not come back after even reclamation has been done. Long-term pollution is also a problem that we are facing, and then the weak rehabilitation culture. So some companies or some rehabilitation is done in a way that it meets with the surface level requirements. And when you have to actually go into it, you realize that it doesn't support the ecosystem services. It's not able to really bring fruit and much profit after reclamation has been done. So it's done on the surface level. You see your trees, and then it looks like reclamation has been success, but it may not necessarily be meeting some ecosystem services. And then lastly, we would also talk about invasive species and then pest outbreaks. So when mining has been done in a site and reclamation is done, even when you plant your native species, there is the likelihood that invasive species are going to overshadow or overcrowd such sites that have been reclaimed. So after looking at all these challenges that we are facing, we would go on to also talk about ways by which we can, curb these challenges that we are facing in the industry. And the key one is the baseline biodiversity studies, even before the project begins. So before you start a project, there's a baseline study that is done to make sure that you have all the information on exactly what is on the land and to put the best measures in place while the mining is being done, and even after mining for the reclamation projects that is going to be done in the site. We would also talk about collaborating with our forestry and wildlife agencies. This is essential to know that we are getting the expertise that we need in some of these projects that we do, because without such those expertise, we might go on to start projects and then do it not to fulfill the purposes that it's supposed to fulfill. So that is also key. And then we'll go on to talk about erosion control. So the use of contouring, hydroseeding, and vegetation buffers are also very essential in order to stop, sedimentation into water bodies and so on. Moving on, we'll talk about the rehabilitation practices. So rehabilitation practices would include the progressive reclamation, which is basically concurrently reclaiming lands alongside ongoing projects. So whilst you are mining the areas that you are done using, you make sure that you do the reclamation alongside other projects that are still going on. And topsoil management, habitat restoration, and then post-mining land use planning. All these measures are supposed to be taken into consideration in order to be able to restore a land to how it was before, or better still, to a better use, the best possible use that you can give the land after the mining activities have, completed. And we are just highlighting some of the rehabilitation practices from HEA, Goldfields, Newmont, and then Chirano Mines. So currently, Chirano has partnered with the Forestry Commission to plant native trees and then support conservation education as well. And currently in the Upper East region as well, there have been pilots of projects in the Upper East region using the vetiver grass and then fruit trees to stabilize abandoned pits and also restore the soil health as well. So when we come to sustainability, sustainable mining practices are founded on 3 core pillars. That is the economic resilience, environmental stewardship, and then community engagement. And today, for the purposes of our education, we are going to highlight only on the environmental stewardship and community engagement. So environmental stewardship would include water resource management, making sure that we are using our water efficiently, we are recycling our water, and then we are treating it before it's discharged to our local water bodies. We are managing our waste also well. We are reducing our waste, reusing and recycle even before it gets to the landfill sites. And we make sure that we are putting in place measures to reduce pollution, reduce reduce dust in the environment. We are putting in place measures to suppress our dust emission controls, and then actively monitoring and then reporting to make sure that we are adhering to all the standards that we are supposed to. And then we talk about the community engagement. So when every activity, when every project is about to go on, we make sure that you involve the community, because projects that communities are not involved in are projects that communities do not support. There are projects that communities will probably most definitely sabotage. So we ensure that when every project is starting, you include your community in the decision making. They are involved in the project as much as possible. They are educated, they are trained, they are employed as much as possible, because even after the life of mine where reclamation projects have been done, the community is going to be there, and we need to make sure that we are handing over the projects to them, and it's the projects that they were in support of. So we would also highlight on certain innovations that we can implement also in our biodiversity management to ensure that we are getting the most benefits, and then we are being able to expedite the work that we are doing. So we involve drone mapping and GIS and remote sensing to be able to to ensure that we can cover our vegetation and then monitor over the period to make sure that if we have put in any project, to monitor the progress of the project, whether it's deteriorating, whether it's succeeding. These are measures that we can put in place to be able to determine some of these things. We can also use AI to be able to give projections of the recovery rate and different projections that we need even before we start a project. These are measures that we can put in place to better give us understanding of, what we are doing, and then ensure that we are monitored and we are doing the right thing. We can also partner with academia, UMAT, KNUST, and institutions that are constantly doing several researches that can help support in give their technical support for biodiversity audits and so on. So we ensure that we have some of these people to assist in some of these projects that we do. And then lastly, we'll talk about bioindicators. So bioindicators are basically biological indicators. They are animals, they are trees that you can monitor over time to make sure that, to be able to tell if your reclamation has been successful or not. Because if you reclaim a land and then over time you come and then your trees are not growing and then there are no animals, more likely your reclamation was not successful. So looking at some of the legal framework, we would not spend so much time on this. So from the EPA to the MINCOM to the water resources and the international guidelines as well that govern biodiversity and our environment in the mining space and even outside of the mining space. So bringing us to the case study that we are touching on today, this is a project that was done in HEA Obuasi, and the sole purpose of the project was to determine if a reclaimed site was successful. So the overview was is basically on terrestrial invertebrates, and they make up about 85% of all the documented species in the world. And they are some of the most important species that contribute greatly to the ecosystem. So terrestrial invertebrates, if you do not quite understand, are basically the ants, the snails, the mollusks, these animals that are very sensitive, that if any little thing is done in a site, more likely they would not be there over time. So we studied them at a reclaimed site, and then we studied them in an undisturbed area. We compared the data to see if reclamation was successful at the site. So some of the gaps that this project was supposed to fill was biodiversity outcomes in reclaimed areas often are assumed more than they are scientifically validated. Usually when reclamation is done, we usually think that it's been successful because we see our trees thriving, and then we think that is just all the purpose of the reclamation. So this was to be able to get some scientific data to back whether reclamation was successful or not. And also reclaimed mine sites often look restored even if they haven't really fully recovered their ecological functions. The aim of the project was to assess the success of the reclamation at the Inshasu reclaimed pits at the HEA mines, and then also provide some measurable evidence of ecological recovery at the Inshasu reclaimed pits. So on the case study, the mode of which we took our data was using pitfall traps, and then basically we set plots, about 10 plots in each site, in the reclaimed sites, and then in the undisturbed area as well. So each plot had about 5 samples of 5 pitfall traps in each plot, which was about 50 meters apart from each other. This is a picture of the pitfall trap, how it typically looks like. So this is supposed to basically trap the insects in the trap. And these are pictures that were taken from the site. So there's the land demarcating to be able to set the plot. And then afterwards, we go on to fix our pitfall traps. And then we go on to label the traps to make sure that we are getting all the data accurately. We measure for litter depth also, because some environmental factors also help to influence the organisms that are in the particular area. And then finally, we took the sample. So each sample was left there for about 5 days, and then it was replicated 3 times in order to get a more accurate information. So the Inshasu reclaimed pits on the site were not less than 60% of indigenous species and not less than 40% of exotic species. The parameters that were taken were the native and exotic species, the abundance, the litter depth, the tree distribution, and then the invertebrate abundance, richness, and diversity was achieved after we got the data and then did our analysis. So this is me taking the samples to the museum to do further classification of the samples. And these are not really good pictures, but pictures that were taken of some of the samples from the site. And with the analysis, we use some softwares and then the Opal and Insect Connect guide as well to help with the sorting of the identification as well as the Google Lens as well. And we use the Paleontological Statistics version 4.01 for the analysis of the samples. So the result of this study was that we recorded a total of 765 specimens for the undisturbed sites, and then 691 specimens for the reclaimed sites. They all belong to about 30 species in total. The species richness was 23 for undisturbed and 22 for the reclaimed sites, and the index for the species diversity was 3.212 for the reclaimed sites, and then for the undisturbed it was 3.313. And from the assessment, we could tell that from the numbers that we got, the dung beetles were the most, the ones that we recorded the most population from. So we'll highlight very briefly on some of the significance of the dung beetles in the reclaimed sites, and then why seeing them in their numbers was a good sign for the reclamation that had been done. So the dung beetles are very good with nutrient translocation, and then they help reduce the parasites loads. They break the breeding cycle of disease-carrying pests as well. They are also very critical agents for secondary seed dispersal. Some of these attributes do not cut across all other terrestrial invertebrates. That's why I highlighted on just the dung beetle. They rapidly disappear when the ecosystem is stressed. So they are presence in abundance in a habitat shows that reclamation was successful, and then the ecosystem is performing at its best. And also their presence is a unique proxy for large animal activity, large mammals. So the probability that if they are there in their numbers, other larger mammals will be able to recolonize this reclaimed pits, the animals that were there before would be able to come, because now the environment is suitable for them again to exist in it. And then to conclude, we'll talk about the difference between the species richness, the diversity and abundance was insignificant. Hence, the recolonization of terrestrial invertebrates to the Inshiaisu reclaimed pits, we can say was successful. There was a slight lower abundance in the reclaimed pits, which reflects, some of the human impacts that have gone on over there, but it was insignificant, and it's not to the extent that it can actually compromise the ecosystem's function. And then we'll talk about the rehabilitation strategies that were used in Obuasi. Because of the results that were gotten, we can actually attest to the fact that it was successful, and over time, regular monitoring of biodiversity projects would be very good to, enforce biodiversity monitoring, and ensure that our projects that we are doing are not just surface level meeting with compliance regulators, but we are actually helping the community or helping in our environment in a much deeper, in a much better way. And bringing my presentation to a close, I would also like to acknowledge the key people that helped in making sure that this project came off, and then this project was successful. They facilitated getting into the mine, they facilitated everything that was needed and necessary to be able to carry out this project. And it goes ahead to attest to how HEA Obuasi is going a step further to scientifically prove that the measures they are putting in place is not just meeting with the regulatory standards, but also successfully reclaiming the lands to be able to provide the ecosystem functions that we need it to. I would say a big thank you to, again, the founder of the chapter, Mr. Henry Aintree, and also the former MD for AngloGold Ashanti, current CEO for A4 Mining Services, Mr. Eric Subontin, for making this possible. And I am really grateful for the help and the assistance that was given through the execution of this process. I hope it enlightens other people, and then it gives other people, ideas on different ways that we can be able to assess our reclamation works and then our rehabilitation works in order to make sure that we are achieving our goals successfully. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nani Yeboah Boadi. I really enjoyed the presentation, and I really learned a lot, and I saw a lot of practical knowledge from what I did in school, as in from biodiversity, ecological restoration, wildlife studies. It's being practicalized in your presentation. I really did learn a lot. I hope we all learned a lot. So please, I hope everyone who has questions have noted them down. We'll get to that soon. But for now, keep your questions. When it's time for it, then the floor will be given to you. Thank you very much once again, Nani Yeboah Boadi, for such an amazing presentation. So I would like to call upon the founder, Engineer Henry Entry, to give us his address. Engineer Henry, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, please, we can hear you clearly.
First, I would like to acknowledge the good work that has been done by the organizing committee of the Environmental Department of the AusIMM. Just 3 weeks ago, we had the first mining engineering workshop. About 200 participants took part in a very insightful discussion. And so when the environmental group came, I told them that we have to get a minimum of 50 participants, otherwise it will not be worth justifying the workshop. But to my surprise, we have about 160 participants on this workshop, and that demonstrates the hard work that they've done. I also want to express my thankfulness to the chairperson, the chairman of the function, and also industry practitioners who have joined us today, in addition to students across Ghanaian universities. But I would like to situate my remarks on a practical scenario about myself entering the environmental space. And I say this because I've been advising students to multi-skill in the current competitive job market. Because if you don't multi-skill with automation and all these scenarios coming in, it will be very challenging for some of you. So first of all, I happen to diversify into environmental and reclamation engineering just by chance. After I finished my master's degree at the Colorado School of Mines, I joined BHP in the US operations. And just to give you a bit of context, BHP is the largest mining company in the world with a market capitalization of about $142 billion. So if you want to go and buy BHP now, you have to pay $142 billion. So being so big, we decided that they will only hire from the best mining universities in the world: Colorado School of Mines, Camborne, Curtin, Queensland University, Pennsylvania State, and others. And every year they will shortlist about 50 graduates and take 5. And the 5 that are taken will be called project engineers. So you'll be a project engineer until there's a position in their global mines or in the US. And unlike Ghana, where they throw out national service personnel to fight for themselves or graduate trainees and so on, you are maintained until you find a position within the company. So when I joined, there was a backlog of about 4 years, which means about 20 mining engineers, all waiting for positions within the organization. So I asked myself, how long is it going to take for me to get a promotion? And so I decided on diversifying, multi-scaling, and so on. The position came up called reclamation engineer. And when I looked at the job description, it was mainly people with environmental expertise. But I put in my application anyway. And the turning point was a question that the panelists asked on what has been my contribution to environmental sustainability within BHP since I joined. And absolutely none. I had no example of contribution towards environmental sustainability. But at interviews, you just don't go there and say absolutely nothing. So I had to say something. And one of my tasks as a project engineer was to take high school students on a tour of the mine once a month. So we put them in a bus, and on one occasion, I took them to the pit to see the interaction of equipment, dozers, excavators, drag lines, and how they interact in the pit. Then I took them to a reclamation site and told them this place had been mined, reclaimed, and you see all the vegetation there. A very smart student asked me, I don't believe you. Prove that this place had been mined and reclaimed. And this was challenging for a student to ask, how do you prove to a student that the place has been mined and reclaimed? So I took them to the survey room, gave them some KFC to enjoy themselves, then pulled a projector. And then I showed them a map of the place pre-mining, before mining, and then superimposed that on mining, when it was mined, and then had a third map on post-mining to show the reclaimed area. So the coordinates are all the same, and they could see it. I'm not too sure whether I was able to convince that particular student. This was on a Wednesday, and on a Friday, the general manager came to my office and said, a family close to the mine has asked that they want to have dinner with me, and it was requested by the parent of a student, the student who asked that question, to prove that that place has been reclaimed. So I went, and it happened that the father was a traditional leader of the Navajo tribe. See, the mine was situated in the what we call the native Indian land, the Aborigines, the true owners or the first owners of the United States. And this man was one of the traditional leaders of the Navajo tribe. So his concern was a lot of mining investors were coming into the area to ask for concessions. And he's the first call on social license, social acceptance. And he was worried that the mining will disturb his land. But now his son has come in to convince him that we are not actually disturbing the land as he thought. So he wanted to get more clarity on what we were doing. So this was the response that I gave to the panel. And then 2 weeks later, I got a call that I've been given the job of reclamation engineer. I was the first mining engineer to be given that position. Always it goes to the environmentalists and so on. And so the Human Resources Department told me that the mining lease was actually coming to an end, and they were very concerned that it might not be renewed. But that dinner turned the corner for the company in terms of renewal. But when I got the position, I realized that the reclamation engineers had a scope of just getting what the mining engineers tell them that is going to be disturbed over the life of the mine, and then the waste required to backfill the pits, the reclamation processes, and they come up with a closure plan and give it to the regulator to post a bond. A bond is the money that you post to the government in case you go bankrupt. Then they use the money to reclaim the disturbed areas. So that was the scope of the reclamation engineers. Now, because I'm a mining engineer, I took keen interest in the life of mine designs, 15-year mine life, the amount of waste that is needed to backfill these pits, and so on. But historically, what happens is if you send your closure plan to the regulator, in Ghana, I think the EPA, it takes a while because they will come up with questions. Some of the questions will be, what is the impact of the mine on a lake close by, the fish, and so on. And it takes a while of going back and forth, clarifying these questions. So I took a different approach and adopted a town hall meeting where I'll bring the entire community together, present the plans, and then they'll ask questions. So there's clarity upfront. Then I'll go on TV stations and radio stations to present the plans. And that truncated the approval process for BHP at the time. So fast forward that, I was enjoying it, interaction with stakeholders. And then a year later, my boss called me and said, there's a position called stripping engineer, which is a higher position than reclamation, and I should take it. In fact, it was a sad moment because I was really enjoying reclamation engineering. But when I took it, I think about 3 months, 4 months, commodity prices collapsed. And then massive retrenchments across BHP. And in the Western world, when they will say retrenchments, the first people to go are the foreigners. Number one, you are not a US citizen. And number two, they want to protect local jobs. And so I was all organizing myself to return to Ghana when I was told that instructions have come from the head office that I should be transferred to Australia. That triggered my transfer from the United States to Australia at the time, among other things. But when I went to BHP Iron Ore in Australia, I was given a position of strategic mine planner. And the first thing I saw was this acid generating material in the waste. And this was one of the largest open pits in the world. So we have to transport this acid generating material 10 kilometers to a place dedicated by the regulator at the time, that because of the toxicity, it has to be dumped in the particular area. So the mining engineering in me got to work, estimated the haul distances, the costs involved, millions of dollars per year, and more importantly, the impact on the company's cash flow. That was the telling point. But you don't go to your CEO and tell him it's costing you millions of dollars to haul acid generating material. This is the impact on the cash flow without a solution. And so my environmental reclamation engineering gave me some ideas on encapsulation. You don't have to take it to the longest haul. You can take it to the shortest haul by encapsulating. So we did the engineering around encapsulation and then presented to the equivalent of the regulator, what you call EPA in Ghana, the equivalent in the United States. It was approved. And so when I got the opportunity to be head of operations, I had done environmental reclamation engineering at depth. And so I took keen interest. And the reason is a lot of you sometimes miss the point that if you're a CEO or a mine manager, the life of the mine depends on the environmental sustainability issues that was discussed. Because if you breach the law in the Western world, your mine will be shut and everybody will lose their jobs. In Africa, it's not as deep as it is in the Western world, where they take these things very seriously. And so to me, the biggest headache as head of operations was the environmental aspect. And so every day I was engaged in the environmental department. And one of the things I did to sensitize engineers especially is we will identify the high potential candidates who will be going into senior management, and we will attach them to the environmental department for 1 year to work with reclamation, environmental, so that they are up to speed with those developments. And when they become managers, they take those things very seriously. But fast forward, I came on an official duties in Ghana, and then Akua, the speaker, approached me with her topic. And I got very interested. Interested because he was trying to measure the success of reclamation. Typically, mines like Anglo Gold, Ashanti, Newmont will say, we've reclaimed the area, the trees are all flourishing, it's growing. But how do we measure the success, whether the reclamation has been successful? And so I called the managing director of Obuasi at the time, Erica Subontin, and I said, look at this. He said, we are doing something similar, not as detailed as she's doing. And so she forwarded her project to the environmental department. She conducted the studies, went back, and then, you know, the trouble with your national service, everybody's struggling for positions. So she was struggling, really struggling, got a place finally to Pristia Bogoso at the time. And then she got a call from Anglo Gold Ashanti to come to Obuasi for her national service. And as usual, the stress. I don't know anybody in Obuasi. And then I have to go for reposting. And then Obuasi said, no, there's no need for reposting. We'll give you temporary accommodation. We'll give you 2 days to report. It was because of the impact of that project work. When she finished her national service, the other challenge is graduate training. They've got only few slots. So she was thrown out, strategizing on what to do next. Now, I had come to Ghana on an official duty again, this time at the Jubilee House, to talk about environmental sustainability on the Galamsey areas, because they had gotten a grant from the World Bank to reclaim a lot of these Galamsey areas. And so as the discussions was going on, I escalated it to the big mines, to the multinationals. How do we measure the success of those reclamation areas that they claim they've reclaimed? And then I went to Abuja on an ECOWAS workshop. These discussions continued. I left back to Australia, and then I got a call from the Minister of Lands and Natural Resources, one of the guys there, that you talked about a student doing some project in Obuasi on environmental sustainability. Can you send me her CV? So I did. Never heard anything. 2 months' time, the Akua called me and said, Minerals Commission has given me a job. No letter, no expression of interest, no interview. They just gave me the offer, and I don't know what to do. And I said, pursue it. Now, maybe she's hearing this for the first time. That's how she got a Minerals Commission job. So the story is, Don't sit in your silos as geologists, mining engineers, metallurgists. Explore other opportunities, especially in the current environment where ESG, environmental sustainability, has become very critical for the mining industry. In fact, investors look at ESG as a first call to invest. And now that I've switched positions and I'm now working for governments and investors, anytime I'm called to a mine for due diligence, that's the first thing I look at, your environmental impact assessment and what you've done on the ground. So I wanted to put this in context so that you understand the practicality of these environmental issues. And my advice is wherever you are, it doesn't have to be environmental. Look at opportunities. An example, one of the former AusIMM financial secretaries is was a safety engineer. I put something on my status on occupational health in Australia. He calls me and he said, this is an area that he's very keen to do. I said, explore it, do some more research and discuss it. Do you have a position in Obuasi called occupational hygienist or whatever? He said, no. He developed that scope, engaged in discussions, and then they decided to have somebody in that role. But when the position was advertised internally for everybody to apply, a lot of them knew that the position had been crafted for him, and he took that role and is doing very well in that job. Recently, a metallurgist in Australia approached me and he said, this automation is going too fast, and the robotics and everything in the plant is being automated as he speaks. So he's very concerned that he's going to lose his job. Then I asked him a question, have you heard of geometallurgy? He said, no. Go and do research. He did a research, engaged in discussions, and now he's the first person to be engaged to explore geometallurgy to improve NPV of the mine. So I wanted to put this in context so that you understand the importance of multi-scaling, especially in the current competitive environment. Thank you very much for the insightful discussion, and now I'll leave the floor to the moderator.
Thank you very much, Engineer Henry, for such great insights. And please, as Engineer Henry touched on, encouraging the other engineers, that is geologists, to also pursue environment. We in the environment should also know the value of what we have done and what we've been studying and what we've studied, and therefore also pursue the career knowing where to go. Because with examples Mr. Engineer Henry cited, environment is everywhere. And if you are in such field, you should know that you are really valued. So you have to try your very best to develop yourself, learn online, do courses, join these webinars, because if you did not join this webinar, you wouldn't have known this. If I didn't join today's webinar, I wouldn't have heard what appreciated what I've done so far in school. I only think that, oh, it is theory, oh, I've already learned it, I've written exams, I'm done, next. But today's webinar has made me realize whatever I did back in school, in class, my lectures taught me, it's being applied in the field, and it's really needed in the field, and there are advancements to it. So please, my environmentalists, please take notes. Don't let the engineers, the civil, the geological come and take your jobs, please. Let's take note of that. So I will jump a section and come back to it. So I know we have learned a lot and we have heard a lot from our chairperson to the founder and from our presenter, Yeboah. So please, this section, I open for questions. If you have any question at all, no matter how it is, like I understand maybe not all of us are in the environment field and therefore might not understand some key terms or some words that were said by the presenter or even Engineer Henry or the chairperson. So I open the floor for questions. You can raise your hand using the reaction to raise your hand, or you send your question to the chat box and I read it for you. I read it out and then your question be answered. So anyone with any question, the floor is open for you. You can raise your hand and then you'll be allowed to unmute yourself and ask your question, or you type your question in the chat area. So the floor is open for questions. Please, do we not have any questions for today's workshop? If we have learned a lot, definitely there must be some questions on our minds. If you do not want to say it, you can type it in the chat box. I will read it out.
Maybe I'll ask the first one.
Okay.
To Nana Akua, who works for the Minerals Commission. There's been a lot of environmental degradation as a result of these Galamsey issues, as the chairman spoke about. What is the Ghana government doing to address this challenge? Not the Galamsey itself, but the areas that have been disturbed. Because I was at a meeting when a discussion took place on a grant that was being given by the World Bank, but I haven't seen much on the ground. Is there something going on in the ground that you can share?
Nanika Yeboah, please, the question is to you.
Please, can I guess the question again?
Yes. What I was saying is, I've been at meetings in the past where there was discussion on grants being given to Ghana to reclaim some of the Galamsey disturbed areas across the country. But I've not heard of any action on the ground, and maybe because I don't live in Ghana much. You being at the Minerals Commission, are you aware of any reclamation going on or plans to reclaim some of these disturbed areas as a result of Galamsey activities?
Okay, thank you for the question. And currently, to the best of my knowledge, most of these Galamsey sites and most of these disturbed areas, even after reclamation, you go in to do reclamation because the community might not necessarily be in support of it. They go back and then disturb the land that has been reclaimed again. So to the best of my knowledge, what I know that the Minerals Commission is planning to do now is corporate mining, especially in the Upper East region. So there's plans and measures being put in place to be able to stop Galamsey by making it a corporate mining community thing, that the current Galamsey people would now be able to, we would be able to monitor the works that they are doing, we'll be able to put the right safety measures in place, because without doing that, we would go back to keep rehabilitating lands that have been disturbed. They will keep going back to disturbing the same lands again. So if you're on the same page with them and they understand that we are not necessarily trying to take their livelihoods away from them, but we are giving them an alternative means that will be a better measure for them and then for the government as well. So currently that is what the Minerals Commission is doing. So I believe that when we are able to successfully start this, then reclamation will be more successful because they will not have to be going back to be disturbing areas that are no-go areas. Thank you.
Moderator, if I may come in also.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, may I come in just following up on the response from Nana?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yes, Engineer, thank you very much. This Prof. Thank you very much for your presentation and motivation. Now, say something more directly about your question. I have been, like I said in my presentation, my earlier remarks, I've been very interested in reclamation. I have had I've trained a number of PhD students in reclamation, some of these large-scale mining companies. I actually come from one of the centers of Galamsey activities in Ghana, from Manson area. So I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. The fact of the matter is that I have not seen any evidence indicating that government is doing some reclamation anywhere in the country. I've not seen anything like that. As a matter of fact, recently I was actually contacted by, some people who were interested in, or I should say, who are interested in reclaiming some of the degraded areas. They want us to form a consortium and things like that. So we actually made some inquiries with government, and we were told bluntly that government is tight on budget, and therefore it cannot even help. So we have to speak to Minerals Commission. The group has met Mineral Commission before, and Mineral Commission directed them to Gold Board. And when I heard this from the leader of the group, I said, look, this probably not go anywhere. The fact is that as a country, I don't think we are serious about, reclaiming the degraded areas. From where I sit, I can appreciate the implications of the destruction that is going on. In fact, not just forecasted, but I see the impact happening in some of communities that I've known. We have to be serious about it. The other thing about it, that when you talk about reclamation, a lot of people, a lot of Ghanaians think that it is just a matter of covering up the pit and then planting some trees. I'm glad Nana pointed out in her presentation that when the place has been reclaimed, there are a lot of lingering issues. We have pollution legacies, a lot of metals that, after 20 years are still in the soil, and that makes it very difficult to even plant crops there. You have invasive species, and I'm also very interested in invasive species. I've done some studies with some PhD students. We are seeing that some of the reclaimed areas have as much as 60% invasive, abundance. So reclamation is not just about, covering up the pit and then, planting some trees. What are the objectives of the reclamation? What do you want to achieve? So I'm glad that Nana and Co were looking at the invertebrate as indicators of reclamation success. What is it that we want the reclaimed land to do? And how do we measure the success? So these are some of the things. How do we deal with acid mine drainage? How do we deal with invasive species? How do we deal with the loss of ecosystem services? So these are some of the things, and unfortunately, I'm not seeing anything concrete on the ground, unfortunately. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you too. So I would like to read some of the questions in the chat box and come to you, Mr. Ernest. So from Mensa Isaac, rehabilitation measures include topsoil management. What topsoil management in mining operation, and what is again, rehabilitation measures include topsoil management. What is topsoil management in mining operation, and how does it contribute to a rehabilitation measure? Daniel, can you please the question? Please, did you hear me? Ms. Naneka Yeboah.
Yes. Okay. Topsoil management question, right?
Yes, please.
Okay, so with topsoil management in mining, it basically involves stripping of the topsoil, storing it, and then reusing the soil after the activity has been done. So if there's going to be mining in a particular site, the topsoil is not discarded, because at the end of the day, it will be needed for reclamation purposes. You need it to be able to sustain the plants that you are going to plant, the vegetation that you are going to grow on the land. So it is stored and then it is reused when reclamation time is due. So this soil basically has the nutrients that you need to sustain the vegetation that you are going to plant. And I don't know if that answers the question.
Mr. Mensa Isaac, I hope it has been answered.
It answers it, but let me follow up on something. Sometimes these topsoil will stay there for years before it's used. Do the nutrients in there, are they still sustained for 5 years, sometimes 10 years before it's used? Maybe Prof can help us with that.
So yes, the nutrients may still be there, maintained, provided there's no erosion. The other thing is that sometimes moving the soil, the stockpile soil, to the reclamation site may also be problematic. But if the stockpile soil stays for a long time, it may lose its because of leaching and other mineralization processes. So how to manage it is very, very important. And as I said, I work with one PhD student just finished, and then we're looking at this similar issues, how to even combine different substrates, to give you the best soil to support growth of vegetation. So a lot of things happen, leaching, and still you have issues of metal elevation and contamination there. But I think it's important to recognize that the subsoil should not just be thrown away. You have to manage it. If you manage it well, it doesn't stay for so long, then the nutrient can still be there. And that is why I think the Minerals Commission is also insisting on concurrent reclamation, so that the topsoil doesn't have to stay for too long before it loses its nutrient. So that is, otherwise, if it stays too much and with a heavy rains, sometimes the nutrients could be lost, and with erosions too. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope, Mr. Mensa Isaac, your question has been answered well. To Mr. George Boateng, from Mr. George Boateng, which specific conservation strategies have proven most effective in Ghana's mining zones, and why? Ms. Naneka, please, did you get the question? Which specific conservation strategies have proven most effective in Ghana's mining zones, and why?
Okay, thank you for the question. So some strategies that are most effective that we use in Ghana and even outside of Ghana. Firstly, we need to consider the fact that before every activity, before every mining activity is done, we need to make sure that we have a baseline study. We have done our EIA, and then we have a baseline study of what exactly is on the land, of the ecosystem services that the land is providing, of the habitats in the particular site, and also the animals that are there, the trees that are there. So when you have done this particular, when you have put in place this method or this strategy, it helps you to it informs everything that you do from henceforth. So when you are mining, it helps to inform how to mine, what exactly to best do in this land, so that you can be able to reclaim it successfully, and then even informs what reclamation projects or what reclamation processes that you should put in place even after the mining is done. So when you do this, it informs everything right from the beginning to the end. So if you are able to get that information, that is one key strategy that informs everything. And then the possibility of being successful during the measures that you are putting in place when mining is even going on, the protective measures you are putting in place, and also the measures, the reclamation projects that you do afterwards, it becomes even more successful having a background knowledge of what exactly was on the land. Because if you don't have that data, then it begs to, question what exactly are you going to do on the land, what reclamation project is going to be done, how are you even going to know if you could not achieve you cannot achieve taking the land back to how it was, how are you going to know if you are taking it to the best possible use after reclamation is done?
Thank you very much, Ms.
Okay, moderator, let me also support what Nana has said. For me, I've been working a lot with the mining companies and doing a lot of surveys. One of the things that I see to be very, very key in reclamation or conservation of mine areas is the preservation of remnant ecosystem, high biodiversity areas, or high biodiversity value, areas. If you look at the mine concession, it's not every part of it that is used for mining operations. And sometimes when you, like Nana talked about, when you do your baseline survey, you realize that there are certain areas that contain some vital, biological resources, such as forest reserves. If these are maintained, they really go a long way to help the reclamation effort. Because they could serve as reference sites for the reclamation, measuring the success of the reclamation. But more importantly, they could also serve as sources of, propagules, like sources of animals, sources of seeds that can repopulate the reclaimed areas. So for me, the maintenance of such areas, of these key biodiversity areas within the mine concession is really, really important to support the reclamation effort. And that's what I want to add. It's also important that with what we are seeing with the invasive species and exotic species, it is very important that we need to move away from the use of these nitrogen-fixing exotic plants. Mainly, those are the ones that are being used, like Senna, Semia, Lucina, Acacia mangiums. These are very fine plants, nitrogen-fixing. They do well on poor nutrient soils. But it is also important to know that they are invasive species. They spread very rapidly and take advantage of the entire ecosystem. So we need to move away from the complete use of those ones to including a lot of native species that are also, quite competitive. And if we do that, then we'll be able to, enhance the biodiversity of the reclaimed area. So these are two things that I want to add to what Nana Akua said. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. And then I hope your question has been answered, George Martin. Mr. Enes Adeko, please, you can ask your question. Mr. Enes, please, you can ask your question.
Okay, so please, I want to ask that, given that most of the small-scale miners are often linked to illegal mining activities, I want to ask that, does Mineral Commissions have system in place, and if they do, what are the systems that they have in place to ensure that these permit holders fully comply with all the regulatory requirements?
Nanekia, please, was the question clear?
Yes, please. So, small-scale mining is not necessarily galamsey. So galamsey is illegal. You don't have a permit. And then when you have a permit, just like any other large-scale mine, you are under the commission, and then the same measures that are put in place to ensure that everything is being done right with the large scale is the same thing that is done with the small scale mine. So there's regular inspections, they have to undergo training. All the measures that are put in place with the large scale mine, same is done with the small scale mine. They are not treated like galamseyers where they can do anything however they want to do it, and then they don't have any rules or regulations that govern their work. They also have systems in place to monitor every work that they're doing right from the beginning to when they start operating. They go through the same processes to acquire their licenses, and then from there, they become legalized. And from there, the Minerals Commission, there's routine inspections to the sites all the time to make sure that they're adhering and they're compliant.
Thank you. Mr. Ennis, I hope your question has been answered.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let me read a question from the chat area. So Abdul wants to know, how is underground mining reclamation done? And underground water mostly encountered, sorry, let me read it again. How is underground mining reclamation and groundwater are mostly encountered during mining? Is there any measures in place for that when reclamation is being done? So the question is about underground mining reclamation. How is it done? And is groundwater mostly encountered during mining? And are there any measures put in place for that when reclamation is being done? Nanika, please, did you get the question?
Yes, please. I got the question. So when it comes to underground mining, because the work that they do underground does not directly affect, what is going on the surface of the land, there may not necessarily be vegetation on the land, but when it comes to underground mining, the infrastructure, whatever that is being used, any equipment, using down there is taken out, and also it's backfilled to ensure that when it comes to underground mining, there's mostly on the stability of it, to make sure that it's not going to cave in, to make sure that it's not going to be unstable and then affect, the life on land and all that. So after infrastructure have been taken out, it is backfilled. If revegetation has to be done on the land, it is done. And if Mr. Henry Entry can throw a little more light on that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you to Engineer Henry.
Okay, I think you said it. In many instances, the depth underground is so high that it doesn't have much impact on surface infrastructure. But where in areas there is impact, then there is obligation on the multinationals or the mining company to backfill. In fact, last time you heard about some backfill strategies that are being adopted by some of the mines and so on. So in short, it is not normally done. It can be very expensive. If you look at AGA or Boadi, for instance, that has been mining for over 100 years. They've disturbed a lot of, there's a lot of underground openings there. And if you go back to reclaim that, then the mine will be bankrupt and so on. But they ensure that the stability, they have geotechnical engineers who ensure stability so that there isn't collapses after they leave and so on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Engineer, what about the sometimes spillage from the tailings storage facilities?
Yes.
Could that also affect the groundwater and surface water?
Yes. So that's not the underground. This is the tailings that has come on top. And I think in the last workshop, these were addressed and so on. So a number of monitoring schemes have been adopted to ensure that the water are tested before they get out. Engineering, we have geologists or geoscientists, environmentalists, and so on. In Boadi, for instance, there's an intensive work going on there to ensure that these tailings or the spillages don't impact water bodies and so on. The challenge for tailings is not just the water, it's the stability and the collapse that have taken place across the world. That has been a challenge for the mining industry. Just recently, there have been collapses in Bolivia, Indonesia, and so on. So that has been the main challenge in ensuring that they are well anchored and they don't collapse to destroy villages and so on. As I said last time in Brazil, the damage was huge. In fact, it cost the company $7 billion, and 16 people at the mine in Brazil were prosecuted, including the CEO and the engineering designer who actually signed off on the tailings dam.
Okay.
Yeah, Prof, I have a question here just for my learning. Nanika did mention that before mining activities, some baseline study has been conducted. Linking that to the Galamsey site or the small scale mining operations that is going on in the country, where to the best of my knowledge, there is no baseline information. In the attempt to reclaim or rehabilitate those areas, and you want to ensure and wanting to ensure a success rate of a biodiversity study that is conducted. Because there are no prior information regarding the baseline information, how do you ensure the success of the biodiversity study if one decide to conduct a project work in those areas? First of all, you don't know the species that were available in those areas regarding fauna and flora. And so when you do that, how are you going to, prove to someone that a successful biodiversity restoration process have gone on in such an area? Thank you.
Thank you. That's very important and very intelligent question. You don't have any baseline, so how do you know the reclamation has been successful? Yeah, that actually suggests that the baseline data is very, very key. But in the absence of that, we can still do reclamation. But one of the principles, global standard or principles for reclamation or restoration, that must be based on a reference site. So what you need to do is that you have to gather piece together all the available information to develop what we call the reference model. The model is like the condition which you like the restored ecosystem to be like. So even though there might not be a baseline data on which species were there, when you cast your mind around and when you look at the historical data there, you might be able to piece together what probably existed there, and that becomes your model. Or if there's nothing at all, you can use examples from other nearby communities or nearby forest reserve as model. And so that is what you want to reclaim your site to. And so if you're able to achieve that, then of course you say you have done a successful reclamation. So I'm just buttressing the point that the baseline information is very critical. If you have it, it's all the best. But if you don't have it, reclamation can still be done by you developing a model of the kind of condition that you want to create. And you use there are certain attributes of that model that you look out for in the reclaimed ecosystem. And if those are met, then you say you'd have achieved successful reclamation. Now, one way of achieving this very good reference model is by involving the local people. But there are a number of knowledge, different types of knowledge that you can dwell on. We have something called traditional knowledge and then local ecological knowledge. So the people, even though there's no existing, references or forest that can serve as you can talk to the local people. They will give you the information to be able to develop the reference model for your reclamation project. I hope I've answered your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. And then, Mr. Koribanfo, please, your hand has been up for a while. You can ask your question.
All right, thank you very much. So my question was, listening to what Anikia delivered and what Prof has also added up, including that of Engineer Henry, and with the previous webinar that we have attended, we would realize that there are so many innovative ways and research that has been done in the area of reclamation and ESG. But the problem is that we are not implementing it. How come? Is it that we are not having a collaborative effort with government to scale these innovative measures up, seeing that day in, day out, our land is being degraded, and for years now, there have not been any lasting solution to it. So what is the challenge? Because it seems the ideas are there, it seems the innovations are there, but we can't put it into practice. What are we then supposed to do?
Well, if I can come in, the first challenge is money, as Prof said. And I'm a bit surprised because I've been privy to discussions on some grants that have been given to Ghana. Anyway, I'll explore that further, but that's the first point. In the Western world, a lot is happening. In fact, as I speak with you, about $50 billion of projects have stalled, mining projects, because of these environmental issues. There is you have to go through very strict processes to get your environmental assessment approved. Town hall meetings, community inputs. I was involved in a project in Canada where when we submitted the environmental impacts studies, they came up with 250 questions, including steps to protect fish in nearby lakes and so on. So it's taken very, very seriously. It took us almost 1.5 years to get the environmental impact assessment approved and so on. So a lot is happening in the Western world, but the challenge in Africa is they complain about money. But I'm aware, especially in other African countries where the World Bank and other NGOs have dedicated a lot of money. I'm not too sure how it is utilized or the agencies that are giving such money to implement these things. I heard recently that a colleague from the United States is in Ghana trying to put together a strategy to reclaim some of these lands, but it's an area that I need to follow up. And maybe Prof has said it, he's tried his best to contact all the relevant agencies and he's not making any progress. So it's an area that maybe I'll explore with government when I meet them the next time.
Thank you very much. So because of time, we will take one question from the raised hands and I'll read 2 more questions from the chat area. Any other questions you have, you can send them to the group, the AusIMM group. If you are not in the AusIMM group, whichever way you join, send those questions to the person and then the questions will be answered for you. Mr. Derek Tete, please, you can ask your question.
Yeah, hello. Please, can you hear me?
Yes, please, we can hear you.
Okay. So please, my question is, climate change is pushing the world to adopt, how do you call it, renewable technologies, such as this electric vehicles, solar panels, wind turbines, and these technologies also require like critical minerals like lithium, for example, lithium, cobalt, and this mineral, nickel as a mineral, yes. So because global demand is skyrocketing, countries are opening like new mines and expanding old ones. Like even for instance in Ghana, there is this project that is going on in the central region, Mankisim, that I think it's called Atlantic Lithium. They are trying to pass the bill so that they begin operations. And this mines like threatens our biodiversity when they are not like properly managed. So my question is, like, how can Ghana, to be specific, like expand mining for clean energy without destroying our forests, our rivers, our wetlands, and like our species? So that is the question.
Okay, maybe I'll come in and then I'll let the experts also join. So developing countries especially have to create a balance between economic sustainability and impact on the environment. And that's why there are protocols to do environmental impact assessment studies. Now, if you have EPA, Minerals Commission, and other bodies doing their work, then they will scrutinize those studies to ensure that you've done all the things that the NECRIA said and the Prof has said, baseline data, fauna and flora, and all those things in place before they approve it. In fact, in the Western world, without approval, I think in Ghana too, without approval of your environmental impact assessment, you cannot even construct the mine. So those protocols are in place. The challenge in Ghana is the enforcement. When the approval takes place and enforcing that the companies comply to those regulations, that has been a challenge in Ghana, and so on. But in the context of the critical minerals that you talked about, Yeboah, for instance, the Atlantic lithium has faced challenges simply because they oversold this concept of lithium. Now, when lithium came initially, the demand was very high. And so governments in Canada, Australia, United States spent a lot of money in exploration and proving up these resources. And then all of a sudden, we realized that the uptake of electric vehicles has not been as great as it was estimated. For instance, if I come to Ghana and I get to Kotoka International Airport and I want to use electric vehicles from Kotoka to Ashanti region, Bono to the north, what are the charging stations for electric vehicles? That's one. Two, if you get a problem, it's not these fitters. It needs specialized skills to be able to fix these vehicles and so on. And so the uptake has not been so. People will just go with the traditional vehicles rather than going through all these stresses and so on. So the uptake has not been great. And all of a sudden, supply has outstripped demand and prices have collapsed. And this is what has happened to the Atlantic Lithium project. Economically, what they put in their model doesn't work now. It's uneconomical. And therefore, they have to go back to cabinet to renegotiate the fiscal terms and understand it's now going through parliament for ratification and so on. These are critical minerals, especially copper. Copper has been in very high demand across the world because you need it for a lot of things in our daily lives, electricity, wiring, and so on and so forth. And so you see the big players moving into the copper space. Newmont, which has been a gold producer for quite some time now, is now trying to access copper. That's one of the reasons why they acquired Newcrest for about $17 billion to have a hold on copper and so on. So these are critical minerals. One of them is rare earth. And you see that the United States is moving aggressively towards rare earth because China has the monopoly. They have the largest reserves, and they are putting constraints on supply to the world. You need rare earth for ammunition, technology, and so on and so forth. And so you will see critical collaborations happening between India and Australia, for instance. Recently, India and Canada collaborating in the areas of rare earth exploration and development and so on. In Ghana, unfortunately, not much work has been done in base metals, even though there is evidence that the copper, nickel in Ghana. The emphasis has been more on gold than other minerals, and I've been pushing the government along those lines. It is in that context that under the previous government, they formed the Ghana Integrated Aluminium Development Corporation, which I pushed very much, so that we have value addition from bauxite to alumina to aluminium. The challenge is attracting investors in this space because building an alumina plant will require roughly $2 billion, that's for 2 million tons per year, and so on. And then you have to tick the boxes. What is the real infrastructure? Where is the water? Where is the energy? All these boxes have to be ticked and so on. So a number of countries talk about value addition of critical minerals, of bauxite, iron ore, and so on. But they don't clearly understand the cost drivers, the key success factors in developing these assets, because it's not just taking it from the ground. Number one, you need technology. You need companies that have a track record in managing these assets. You need capital, and you need the human resources. In Ghana, you have the human resources. I will use my own example, developing a similar project in the Middle East. They have everything. They have water, they have electricity, but their key component was human resources. There wasn't any mining engineering in the country. There wasn't any chemical engineering, and so on and so forth. So I had to develop policies to develop the human resource capacity, high school graduates, scholarships to various universities across the world, technicians being seconded to plants across the world, battery plants, and so on and so forth. Unlike Ghana, almost everybody came back to the country to contribute to the to the development of these metals. But in Ghana, if you do that, I can guarantee you that 80% will not come back. Only few of you will come back to help and so on. So your question is very important, but it's a strategy to develop these that is very critical. As I speak with you, African leaders are meeting in Johannesburg for G20, and the discussion is, with all the mineral resources in Africa, we should have a very strong negotiation power among the big players and so on. So all these discussions are taking place as we speak.
Thank you very much. Please, I hope Mr. Derry, I hope your question has been answered.
Yes, please, it has been answered. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So I'll take 2 more questions, and that will be all. So we move to the next. Time is far gone. So from Desmond Apia, based on the case study shared and the results from the research, what policies or regulations should government enforce to ensure biodiversity protection in mining activities? Nanika, please, did you get the question?
No, please, can I get the question again?
Based on the case study shared and the results from the research, what policies or regulations should government enforce to ensure biodiversity protection in mining activities?
Okay. So based on the research ensuring that biodiversity is managed efficiently and sustainably, it's essential that we, in a mining company, there's a mandatory biodiversity survey even before operation starts. There should be a survey of biodiversity, including the animals and the plants. And then whilst mining is also going on, because I believe we do not mine all over the area where the company is. So actively also doing biodiversity surveys before, during, and then after mining has been done. So this gives us a fair idea of the changes that have taken place over time. This makes us know that when we did this, implemented this project because of the mining, this is the impact it had on the biodiversity. When we started this project, that is the impact it had on biodiversity. So all this gives us a fair idea of the changes that are going on subsequently as mining is also being undertaken. And then after that, when we are ready to reclaim, we have all the data readily available. We know where to do what, and then we are not now coming to start trying to do a research on what exactly is the way to move forward, or the reclamation plan or projects that are best for the particular site. So if we enforce, doing these surveys before, during, and then after mining is done, I think it will go a long way to help us in our reclamation and then in our biodiversity management in the mine as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Desmond. I hope your question has been answered. One more question, then we'll move on to the next. What research gaps currently exist in biodiversity and mining interactions that students could explore? Please, did you get the question?
Yeah, let me attempt answering that. As I said, I've done a lot of work on reclamation and resources in the mining areas, and I can tell you there are a number of issues that are yet to be addressed. I will start with the topsoil management or the land management. How does that affect the reclamation success? If you use different substrate, if you use, for example, even the question that was asked by engineer, if the topsoil should be stockpiled for a number of years, how is that going to affect the reclamation success? How does that affect the mineral content of the soil? Then the selection of species, the initial list of species that is used for the reclamation. How the species identity, how does it affect the reclamation success in general? And then issue of invasive species. how is that also, contributing to the reclamation success? There's also the issue of soil fertility management. You have a lot of, when you go, you see a lot of litter being produced. Some of these litter do not decompose over a long while. So how does that also affect reclamation? Recently, I also noticed the issue of hybridization between two exotic species. How is this affect reclamation? So there are so many issues that are yet to be looked at, and I think that as researchers we have to look at it. But as was indicated earlier, usually we have the expertise, we have the people who do the work, but there should be collaboration, partnership between industry, government, and then the academia. Unfortunately, in Ghana, industry, government do not seem to contribute so much to academic. I remember when I did my PhD in the US, sometimes you'll be there and then your supervisor will come and discuss something with you. I've had this this request from industry. They want me to do this research, and then he'll put us on it. And before we realize we are a solution to their problems, but that's not what we are seeing. So I can tell you that there are a number of things that can be researched into that remains unanswered in terms of research pertaining to mining and biodiversity.
Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Maybe if I can add to what Prof said.
Yes.
Prof, I think one of the challenges too is, and I think I said it during my public lecture at KNUST a few years back, that the industry doesn't see the visibility of experts like you. You might be on the ground with a lot of the mining companies and so on. Because one of the challenges that they tell me is that they don't see the expertise in Ghana. And so you see that a lot of these multinationals still rely on expertise outside. And I've been challenging them. But I think what I advised KNUST to do was to be an associate member of the Chamber of Mines, as UMAT has done, so that they can participate in the meetings and discussions that go on there. And then they use that opportunity to also market expertise of people like yourselves to assist them with some of these research areas. In fact, me and my colleagues were in Boadi at the KNUST campus, and I was challenging them that they are very close to the mine. The mine has a lot of metallurgical challenges and so on. And all it takes is a bit of collaboration. So I'll encourage Prof and your colleagues to be more visible at mining conferences, to present some of the research that you are doing, and then market the areas that you can assist the industry, be an associate member. I'll follow up with the provost of the College of Engineering to see whether they've now joined. There were attempts to join, so that you can publicize or market your potential to the industry. Thank you.
That's very well noted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Engineer Henry. Thank you very much, Prof. And please, so on the next, I would like to give the floor to the AusIMM International Representative, Engineer George Asongo, to give his remarks. Mr. George Asongo.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much, moderator. I want to thank our chairman, Prof, and our speaker, Nanekuya. That has been a wonderful and a great day for the team. I'm George Asongo, as mentioned, the international representative of AusIMM Ghana. It is a pleasure speaking with you once again, as always. Many of you look forward to hearing from the Ghana chapter rep, and I truly appreciate that. Thank you once again for joining today's session. And as usual, I always encourage everybody, and as much as possible, touch base with your colleagues who are even non-members to also benefit from what you are reaping. This is a great opportunity for you. You might not easily get it elsewhere. no matter the program you are studying or the career path you will eventually take, one thing remains true. Mining and every other industry can only continue sustainably if our environment is protected. It's exactly what the sustainability development goal is. And this reminds all of us to ensure we take good care of our environment. Because there are a lot of benefits if we keep our environments in the right shape. Today's discussion has been so wonderful, and I believe you are not going to just walk out without anything in your sleeves to go out and share with those who could not get a chance to join us. Whether you already knew about this or today was your first time learning it, you are now more informed. You have been equipped to become ambassadors who prioritize environmental protection wherever you find yourselves. So please, don't leave today's knowledge here, as I've already said. Practice what you have learned, and don't hesitate to share it with others, especially those whom I've just stated could not get this privilege to be with us. Once again, I thank you for joining. I hope to see all of you, and even more in our upcoming webinars. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you very much. The speaker, we are much grateful. And once again, to our founder. He spares all his time, energy to ensure you benefit a lot from AusIMM. Myself, in our time, we never had this opportunity. I will always say it, that you need to appreciate it and be grateful for receiving this. Having mentors who are spend much of their time for you in all areas. Thank you very, very much.
Uncle George.
Thank you very much, Mr. George Asongo.
Uncle.
All too soon. Hello? Prof, please, Prof, are you saying something?
No, it wasn't me, it was somebody else.
Okay, Prof. Thank you very much, Mr. George Asongo. All too soon. We are at the end of today's workshop. I hope we all learned a lot. We've heard a lot. And I sincerely apologize once again if your question was not read for you to get a response or you were not given the floor to do so. But kindly note your questions down and I will do well to get your responses for you. Thank you. So we would like to hear the closing remarks from our chairperson, Professor Alexander Kofi Enen.
Hello?
Please, yes, hello, Prof.
Okay, so I wasn't hearing it very well. So I felt that the speaker before you, the international coordinator, actually spoke a lot of things I was going to speak about. So I'll make mine snappy. And I will say that I'm sure you agree with me that in all, this workshop has been a very great success. We've learned so much. First of all, the participation has been excellent, but 160 participants at a point, that is no mean achievement. And I want to you know, acknowledge the work that's been done by the organizers. More importantly, your contributions have been very excellent. First of all, we heard from Nanekua Yeboah Boadi, who spoke a lot about the importance of mining to the economy of Ghana. In her words, mining is an essential part of Ghana's economy. It's something that we cannot do away with. But she also acknowledged the fact that mining has direct effect or impact on biodiversity, and that presents a challenge to us. Often there's habitat loss, pollution legacies, weak rehabilitation culture, invasive species, and pest outbreaks. She also outlined some of the key strategies for conservation, which include baseline biodiversity studies, implementing the mitigation hierarchy, collaborating with forestry and wildlife, and then erosion controls. And then she also talked about some of the rehabilitation practices, and then ended, her presentation with, that case study of invertebrate studies of Anglegold, Ashanti, or field. And so we learned a lot from that study and her presentation overall. Then also engineer entry. One thing I remember from his presentation, the emphasis on the need for students to multi-skill, that we should not just limit ourselves to just one thing, that we should try to multi-skill. And he demonstrated this with his own personal journey in becoming an environmental or reclamation engineer. So I'm sure we've learned a lot from his success story, and that will continue to also multi-skill. Then we came to the question and answers. You asked very insightful questions, and of course, the contributions that came from all of you have been excellent. So I would say that we have learned a lot about biodiversity, and that biodiversity is so important, critical for sustainable development. There's no way we can achieve sustainable development if we neglect biodiversity, especially at the mine site. So whilst we look for the resources from the extractive industry to support the economic development, we should be mindful of the impact on biodiversity. So that is so much we have learned, and that's the previous speaker said. Let us not end it here. We have to go and put this into practice. Let us be ambassadors, helping people to appreciate the value of biodiversity in relation to mining. So thank you all very much for participating. I'm very glad I was able to make it, be a part of this. And I'm hoping that in subsequent ones, we shall avail ourselves to contribute to sensitizing ourselves and educating ourselves as a people. Thank you so much, moderator.
Thank you very much, Prof. Enin. Thank you very much, Prof. Enin. And I have also learned a lot. My key takeaways are the importance of biodiversity in mining, and that we cannot do mining without the environment aspect. And also, as Engineer said, you shouldn't be just one, you should be multi-skilled. You shouldn't just focus on one thing, but be able to find the linkages between professions and courses and be able to advance yourself. So we are coming to the end, and we take our vote of thanks from Mr. Enes Adeko Kwame Jikunu, the vote of thanks and the closing prayer.
Okay. Please, can you hear me?
Hello, Mr. Enes.
Please, can you hear me?
Yes, please, I can hear you.
Good evening.
We can hear you. Go on.
Okay. Good evening, distinguished guests, respected speakers, our chairman, and everyone that joined us for this very insightful webinar. On behalf of the AusIMM Tarkwa Student Chapter, I want to express Our sincere appreciation to all of us who made today's environmental and safety workshop truly impactful. We are deeply grateful to our chairman for this very webinar, for guiding the session with clarity and a strong sense of purpose. To our esteemed speaker, we are actually grateful for the practical insight, highlighting key issues on the importance of mining to the Ghana's economy, biodiversity, and the role it plays, link between mining and biodiversity loss, key strategies for conservation, rehabilitation practices, sustainable resource development, monitoring, and some innovation framework with real world case study. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ernest. Thank you all for
please,
joining today's workshop. Mr. Ernest, you are not done.
Yes, please. The closing prayer, please.
Okay.
Please, let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the wisdom, insight, and clarity shared in today's workshop. As we live, grant us the grace to apply what we learned to protect our environment and uphold safety in all we do. Strengthen our hands, guide our decisions, and let our efforts contribute more to sustainable future. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Mr. Ernest. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's webinar. My name is Abigail Kaikwa Boadi, and I was your moderator for today's workshop. Have a lovely evening, and thank you. Those who have questions, you can also forward it to me, and I'll do what to get responses for you. Thank you, and have a blessed evening.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.